Now we're going to also introduce the other panelists, so give me 1 second here. Do we have Stephen up here? Yeah, there he is. Okay, hey Stephen. Stephen Gutwig is California Director of the Drug Policy Alliance, the nation's leading organization advocating alternatives to the war on drugs. He oversees DPA's statewide legislative agenda. Do we have Diana Goldstein? Hello. Lieutenant Diana Goldstein with the Law Enforcement Against Prohibition League. League's past and present law enforcement professionals believe the existing drug policies have failed in their intended goals of addressing the problems of crime, drug abuse, addiction, juvenile drug use, nor have they stopped the flow and sale of illegal drugs into the U.S. Is Amanda up here? Hello, Amanda. Amanda Rain Brazell. Is that correct? Good enough. With Oakland University, serves as executive coordinator for the Los Angeles campus of Oakland University, where she teaches civics along with politics and history. Amanda has been teaching patients how to handle police encounters for over 5 years and has been an activist for cannabis law reform for 10 years. Would you explain for us what some of those problems were? I didn't quite understand what the interdecent fighting was about.
So, with a midterm election, it's generally conservative voter base that comes out for midterm elections. And so there were some compromises that were put into the bill. And you don't get to compromise, like if you were to submit a bill into the state legislature, you're going to be compromising on that bill throughout, whereas with a voter initiative, you're kind of setting your bets before it gets to the ballot, right? And so there is no compromising after. So the provisions to increase the penalties for providing to minors was something that was contentious. It brought in a law that paralleled alcohol, where if someone who's 21 provides alcohol to someone who's 20, that's a crime. So they paralleled that law for marijuana, and that was also something that created contention. So there was a number of things that brought about that kind of contention. And then also there was just a lot of fear propaganda that happened, like big corporations coming to take over the industry. And the reality of that, if you put some thought into it, is that it's not going to happen right away, because the corporations are basically in bed with the federal government. And it's currently federally illegal, right? It's federally illegal, so that means that the corporations are not going to put all of their billions of dollars of assets on the line with asset forfeiture laws, which means that the feds can take everything that they have. And so that's just not going to happen. And so really, if we legalize it beforehand, and alcohol prohibition in New York ended 10 years before the federal law was repealed, right, that gives us a window of opportunity for our people who have been really building this industry from the ground up to really get the foothold into the industry, so that way we can actually prevent corporate takeover, because we will already establish the industry and we will already be the leaders. And so coming together is really important for 2012. And also I just really want to presence that one of the things that I think the conservative side does really well is they come together even when they're in disagreement. And I was thinking about this when we were going through this election this year, and I was like, wow, you know, maybe that's one of the issues that we're facing as people who are liberal, at least I consider myself liberal, and is that we have our ideals. And if something doesn't measure up to our ideals, we can't set aside our ideals for the greater good of what we're working towards to come together. And so I just really want to encourage us to come together, even if it's not the perfect ideal, because if we're really going to take on the biggest, baddest power there is, which is our federal government, we need to have some solidarity. So.
Thank you. I have to ask you, the answer to this question. I mean, how did the proposition do in Humboldt?
It failed in Humboldt, but Humboldt is also a very small portion of the vote. It really, where it lost that counted was Southern California, and Southern California is, you know, more conservative generally than Northern California. So it didn't carry in a lot of places, and you know, that's just the reality of a midterm election.
Yeah, I would agree with a lot of what's been said, particularly this notion that Proposition 19 was an enormous winner. It changed everything, and not just in California, but across the country. As of yesterday, when I think they finally finished counting the votes that were uncounted on election night. Proposition 19 is now up to 46.5% of the vote, which is remarkable given what what Amanda was saying, that there was always an enormous challenge in putting marijuana legalization on the ballot in a midterm election cycle with a much smaller, traditionally older, traditionally more conservative electorate. And so the obstacles were profound, and the campaign that was run not only moved the ball much farther forward, but it opened up the debate around the country, and it arguably has placed the legalization of marijuana squarely in the mainstream of American politics. Like, that now exists. We are going to see in 2012 ballot initiatives, not just in California, but a whole number of other states are now seriously in play, with Colorado being the most obvious. But in the next, we will be seeing in the next 2, 4, and 6 years ballot initiatives in pretty much all the western states, and Washington and Oregon and Nevada and Arizona and even at this point Massachusetts are all looking very seriously at how to legalize marijuana through the ballot and to some extent through legislation. So this is now wide open. And one other way of looking at the success of Prop 19 is the coalition that we've discussed so far. Doesn't recognize the totality of what happened. There may have been division within what we think of as the marijuana reform community because of the complexity of the issues that are involved in all of the the economics of the business of marijuana, of medical marijuana. But another thing that happened that really needs to be noted is that for the first time we had a coalition not just of drug policy reformers like my organization, the Drug Policy Alliance, but we had organized labor coming out in favor of Proposition 19, which is unheard of. The state's largest union, the 700,000 member SCIU, Longshoremen's Union, the United Food and the Food and Commercial Workers, Western Regional Council, which represents 7 states of food and commercial workers, completely unprecedented. And then on top of that, we had mainstream civil rights organizations, from the California Conference of the NAACP to the Latino Voters League, the National Black Police Association, the League of United Latin American Citizens, mainstream civil rights organizations saying that the legalization of marijuana is a civil rights and racial justice priority. That has never happened before, and it's going to be a model of drug policy reformers, civil rights organizations, and organized labor coming together as a model for the rest of the country.
Diana, I wanted to ask you just very briefly, the state's chief legal official, the Attorney General, has now become our governor. From your perspective as a former law enforcement officer, how do you think the new governor, is going to view the next Proposition 19?
Well, what's interesting, and we talked about the voting and the demographics of why Prop 19 failed, and if you look at it, very similar to when there was the issue in California with Prop 8, what we tend to forget is that a large-scale portion of our Democratic voters are socially conservative. Here, Latinos, 60% voted no on this proposition. It was a, 58% women. So obviously we didn't do a good enough job of communicating the message that we should have. But I think what irritates me more than anything from the political standpoint is every single mainstream Democratic face, and I'm not talking a local supervisor, Jerry Brown, very vocal against it. Barbara Boxer, very vocal against it. Dianne Feinstein, Kamala Harris. Just because we voted Democrats into it, the office, doesn't mean that they're necessarily going to change their viewpoint, and part of that has to do, and I'm speaking from my personal experience, I'm not involved in politics, is that, one of Barbara Boxer's, for example, big things that she just touted this year on her election was that a huge majority of the sheriffs, the elected officials, backed her. And I think our politicians, this is now a bipartisan issue, our politicians are afraid at both levels, okay? of basically bucking the public safety unions. They want that support. They solicit, quite frankly, their horse for our support, because it means a lot to their election. And I have to, give a lot of credit to the local Democrats, the supervisors, and there were in fact some retired sheriffs, some other sheriff's agencies who came out and said, it's time to publicly start talking about this. And that's why I became part of LEAP. And what's interesting, and from a conservative standpoint, I'm a libertarian. I'm an independent. I vote across party lines all the time. Is that there's some really strong conservative voices that brought the debate at hand, and Prop 19 forced that issue. You have, whether we like her or not, Sarah Palin on a interview said marijuana should be legalized. Glenn Beck, I sat there flipping through Fox Channel one night. There's Glenn Beck saying either make alcohol illegal again or legalize marijuana. Dr. Ron Paul, Texas Republican, Rand Paul, his son. And it's an interesting coalition of Tea Partiers, Democrats, and people who really naturally understand this is a failed drug war policy. We are wasting trillions of dollars, and we are throwing our society away.
Why you guys, while you still have the microphone, why don't you guys hear both the DPA and the LEAP take of the powers that really pushed hard behind the scenes to make sure that it didn't work out?
I'll let you start that first. Are you talking about the
like prison guard unions, et cetera?
Yeah, it was interesting. The opposition to Proposition 19 was, it's unclear how much of a case study this is going to be for the future, because the opposition to Proposition 19 was wildly anemic throughout the entire campaign, never raised more than $400,000, was entirely made up of the law enforcement lobby. It was all sheriff's associations and various donations from individual campaigns for DA and sheriff and positions like that across the state, and then and a few random donations like from the California beer distributors threw $10,000 into the No on 19 campaign, which is obviously someone calling in a favor, someone in the law enforcement lobby calling in a favor like that, because it's not very much money, but it's what it's what they could get. We know that they tried to get money out of the Prison Guards Union, which folks in this room may know is the deepest pocketed entity within the prison industrial complex in this state, and responsible for some of the most punitive, regressive, not just drug laws, but criminal justice policies in the state, and responsible for the reason that we still have 3 strikes on the books in California. They turned a deaf ear to the entreaties of the No on 19 folks, because the Prison Guards Union, their #1 priority in the 2010 election was getting Jerry Brown elected. Because the politics of the governors in this state with the Prison Guards Union, would make you want to, tear your eyes out. But the Prison Guards Union and we're asked a lot whether beer and cigarette companies put money into defeating Proposition 19 to maintain their market share. And at this point there's no that this is all publicly known where the money comes from, and they're really, the No on 19 campaign had a hell of a time raising money, and they never really got what they needed. However, as all and Diana's saying that the California Chamber of Commerce played a role as well, but not really big bucks. We may see this change as Proposition 19 demonstrated how that this issue has legs both in California and across the country. We may see in the next 2 years a shift and some big money turning out to try to stop this thing. Half of all drug arrests in the United States are for marijuana.
That's an amazing figure.